Good evening, folks, and welcome to the latest edition of the Gersnet Podcast, which is the independent Rangers podcast made by fans, for fans, and remember, all content is free. You can obviously get on our forums, articles, social media, and podcasts here at Gersnet over at Gersnet Online on Twitter and at www.gersnet.co.uk. Just a little message before we get into it from our sponsors. Firstly, that's Forest Precision Engineering, who are a subcontracted Glasgow-based engineering company, and they've been a big commercial supporter of Rangers for many years. And we're, of course, honoured that they're backing our podcast. You can get them over at www.forestprecisioneng.com. And don't forget, you can also visit the Forest Precision Executive Lounge, a stunning new hospitality area within the historic main stand at Ibrox. For information on how to book this unique and intimate space, you can email the club via hospitality@rangers.co.uk. And my name is, of course, Craig Gray, your host for this evening, joined by Iain Duff and Brian Archer. It's the first time that myself and Brian have been on a pod together, so it'll be good to see that happen tonight. Obviously, it is a very poignant moment for the country as a whole. Let's face it, before we start, we do want to pay tribute to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who sadly passed away a couple of days ago. And everyone at Gersnet, of course, wishes the royal family all the best and gives them all our condolences. And condolences to the country. I think, I think the last few days you've certainly seen a united country, probably for the first time in my life. We've seen how Brexit and independence and other politics the last few years has divided us all, but I think for the most part, we've seen the last few days the country uniting together, which I think is a positive that we can take from it all anyway. But as they say, life does go on, and indeed it goes on for Rangers as well, and that's what we're here to talk about. Obviously, there was no game yesterday because of everything that happened with Her Majesty. Iain, I'll start with you. Personally, I think it was the right decision to call off at least the games at the weekend. But from a footballing point of view, forgetting everything else that's going on, it was probably the best thing for us as well, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, you certainly don't want to sort of, be celebrating that fact. But, the fact is that, we were struggling, and I think getting into that game, if it went ahead yesterday, would have been could have really basically killed our season at that point, because we were obviously on a down, and a game against Aberdeen at Pittodrie is just exactly the sort of game we don't really want when we're in that, and they've been right up for it, and it would appear that we aren't really up for it at the moment. Not the circumstances in any way that you would want it to happen, but the fact that the game wasn't on was probably turned out not to be a particularly bad thing from our point of view.
Yeah, and Brian, I mean, coming on to you, I think a lot of people would have said that after the humbling at Celtic Park, you want a big game to get over it. We thought that was going to be the Ajax game, and that never happened. And a lot of people might be saying that about the game that was going to go ahead yesterday, that after a 4-0 humiliation at Ajax, you're wanting a big game like that to sort of immediately step back up and get points on the board. But, if you're not going to get that reaction at Ajax, I mean, how are you going to get it at Pittodrie?
Nah, I think probably the one place you don't want to go after 2 4-0 humblings is Pittodrie right now. I think they would have been out for blood. I can just picture it in my mind, the kind of late tackles, the elbows flying in, and I just can't see how this Rangers team would have been up for that at this present moment. So I think from a footballing point of view, it probably wasn't the worst thing for the Rangers team not to be playing that game.
Yeah, and of course we will go on to that game on Tuesday against Ajax. Obviously we've not had the chance with everything that's happened to actually go over that. I'll start with you. Just in the first half, for me, it was a complete carbon copy of that first half of the Celtic game at Parkhead. I think the biggest difference being, and possibly the most worrying difference is that Ajax, despite being a far better side than Celtic, obviously, did not come out with the intensity that Celtic do, and were more suited to playing those sort of technical players tactically, if that kind of makes sense, in Europe against Ajax. And it just seemed that the individual basic mistakes we just weren't getting right. I mean, the first goal, people will have their opinions about zonal marking. I don't like it, but, it's just modern football, I suppose. But for me, Goldson, he's not picking up his man. It looks like him and Tavernier are both trying to hug Bassey from behind, as if they wanted some sort of reunion from when they were playing together last season. And then you lose a goal from that. So for me, it was just very similar to that game at Celtic Park.
Well, I mean, I'm going to start by saying I didn't see the game on Tuesday night. I'm glad to say. So I'm probably the both the best and the worst person to ask about it. I mean, but from what I've heard, it sounds as if the game followed exactly, or like you say, very similar sort of path to the Celtic game the weekend, and that is the worrying thing, because Ajax obviously are a team that we could lose heavily to Ajax anytime, and anyone could. I mean, the Napoli-Liverpool game is a good example where Liverpool are a top-class team and they get absolutely trounced by Napoli. So that these results happen. But the trouble is, it's the context of where it's happening. If it was a one-off and we were doing well domestically, then you could say, well, that's just what it is. But it seems to be following a pattern. So the Celtic game, the weekend, was probably bad luck that we had that game going right into the Champions League. And it's highlighted the fact. But we've not looked particularly impressive at all this season. Even in the European games, we've not looked brilliant. I mean, we did well against PSV, but overall the performances haven't been amazing, and I think that's the concern, and that's it's not just a one-off. We lost heavily to teams like Ajax and Juventus and others in the 90s under Walter Smith. At least then, at that point, we were doing well domestically. We were saying that before we came on here, and at this point, we're not even doing well domestically. We're not even doing particularly well against the lesser teams domestically. But in the big game that really matters, we were sadly wanting. So there's obviously lots of concerns there, and I'm sure we'll come on and discuss them in a bit more detail. But yeah, I think there's obviously worrying signs, and I'm kind of glad I didn't see the game. But I can't imagine it was an awful lot better or worse than the game of the weekend. So I've already suffered.
Yeah, I mean, we've suffered twice over this week with the two results. I mean, Brian, look, as I said earlier to Ian, for me, it's individual mistakes. It's stuff it's literally schoolboy stuff, and that is a cliche. But if you look at the game last Saturday against Celtic, the first goal, Kent dilly-dallying, trying to do step overs instead of just clearing these lines, and then when the throw in gets taken, moaning about it not being our throw in. We can go on for all the goals, to be honest, because they were all individual mistakes. I would say maybe apart from the third one, but again, even the Ajax game, as I say, that first goal where Goldson's not picking up his man. The second goal, it's Berghuis that scores. It's a deflection. I understand that the deflection and the actual goal's unlucky, but you're asking the questions, why are they even in that position in the first place? I mean, it looks like, I just watched the highlights back there before we came on. It looks like Tillman could have maybe, put in a foot before Berghuis was getting away to go through on goal. And then the third goal, you've got the Ajax player running down the wing, at breakneck speed going by Tav. And, for me, Tav should just take him out, take the yellow. Oh, well, I mean, lucky we're playing in Europe, because if, he made that challenge in Scotland and Willie Collum was the referee, that would have been a sending off for him. But I mean, it's basic mistakes, Brian.
It is, yeah. It's just, as you say, it's schoolboy stuff. It's not switching on at throw-ins. It's complaining to the referee when you get back in position. I mean, for Celtic's second goal, Kent gives them the ball back and then just kind of ambles about, and you're like, just kick the ball away and get back in position and pick up your men. But it's just, it's basic stuff that's the worrying thing. It's like, you can you can sometimes not accept, but you can understand getting beat by more technically gifted teams like Ajax, or by teams that are faster than you or have got more money. But see, when you're just not doing the basics right, and it's just you're causing your own problems, that's when you really start to question the manager, the players, and just everything that's going on just now. I know we're going to talk about the game on Wednesday, but the one thing I want to see is just us getting back to basics. Just show a bit of heart, show a bit of desire. Put a tackle in, put your foot in, leave one on somebody. Just do something to show something and show that you're still up for this. Because right now it just looks like, I don't want to say it, but it looks like the players are just going through the motions at times. There doesn't seem to be any joy in their play. They're not playing fast, or there's no combination play or 1-2s. It all just looks a bit laboured and a bit like they would rather be doing anything else.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree with you, Brian, and also as well, moving on to the second half, we made 3 changes at half time. I think Matondo, Jack and Leon King came on. Thought Leon King solid again. I don't think he's put a foot wrong any time that he's played for us so far this season. And I know you never seen the game, Ian, but we'll just try and improvise anyway. The last goal, which I'm sure you've probably seen, it's a full back pass from Jack, and obviously the Ajax player runs in, runs McLaughlin, and he scores. One thing that I did like, if you can use that word loosely, about Jack is that as soon as he gives the ball away, he puts his hands up, he admits responsibility, and even in his interview after the game, he also admits responsibility. Now, I know that doesn't quite make up for the goal, but, that is the type of leadership that I want to see, for me, too many times. And this isn't even just about the game, the last couple of games. I think Goldson's very, very, good at this, is when a goal goes in that's his fault, or he should have been putting up his man. The first thing that he likes to do is blame somebody else. It's the midfielder in front of him, it's his partner at centre-back, whoever it might be in that day. So, is that something that you would like to see more of? At least if we are going to make mistakes, players, actually owning up to it and saying, look, we fucked it, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you've got it, haven't you? I mean, if you've made a mistake that's led to something that's turned out to be a goal or whatever, then you've got to put your hands up. You've got that's the bare minimum we would expect. And I would expect a experienced professional to do that as a matter of course. And if they're not doing that, then you've got to question their mentality and what's going on there. To be honest, I feel that's been a pattern over a few years. To be honest, some of the players have just have not maybe taken the sort of responsibility, because the season we won the league, everyone was up and there was no need for it. But previous to that, there was a lot of talk about players, not wanting to put their hands up and admit they've done wrong, or and similarly last season. So yeah, it's the bare minimum. Of course it is. You mentioned Leon King, and I thought, I mean, I didn't obviously see the game, but I've heard that he had a good game, and when I've seen him playing, I've always thought he was good. And that surprises me that last season he never really got a chance, because at times last season we were struggling at centre back because of injuries and so on, and he never even got a look in really at all at any point last season until the very end of the season. So if there is a silver lining at all, if he comes through and makes more of an impression this season, then that would be definitely a positive. But yeah, I mean, I think there seems to be from the outside, and you can never tell really what's going on in a dressing room. You make your own assumptions, but looking at it from the outside, there does seem to be big issues. There seems to be problems, whether it's coming from the coaching side of things or whether it's coming just within the players or a combination of the two. I don't know exactly what's going on, but it looks to me as if they're not all singing from the same hymn sheet at all, and they're not all got that togetherness that you would expect a team. Because when we play against a team like Ajax, we've got far inferior players. Like, we'll be honest about that. Across the board, our squad is nowhere near as good as their squad for a million reasons. What we can do is have the unity, the togetherness, the fight, and all that, all those sort of cliched things that took us to the final of the Europa League last season, and that's what we have in our favour, or we should have in our favour. If we don't have that, then we're going to go out and get gubbed like that every time against these better players. So that's the worry. If that is underlying and that's happening, wherever that's coming from, then it needs to be addressed as a matter of urgency when it comes to these big games.
No, absolutely. And, there is a lot of problems on the pitch, but, a lot of problems off the pitch as well. And that's sort of coming on to my next point about the CTM shambles of the day trip, which I just thought was a complete, joke, to be honest, from the club and CTM. I think the day trip cost about £700, which, a day trip to Amsterdam for £700. Jeez, I think that tells you all you need to know. That doesn't even include your match ticket or an overnight hotel or anything like that. That's literally just the flight there and back. So initially, the flight was going from Glasgow to Amsterdam, the day trip, wonderful. Then I think about 3 or 4 days before, there was no communication at all from CTM, and then they basically got in contact with fans saying that it was now going to Brussels, and then it would be a 2.5-hour journey from Brussels to Amsterdam. And then I think 2 days before the trip, it wasn't from Glasgow to Brussels. It was, but coming back, you weren't going back from Brussels to Glasgow. You were going from Brussels to Prestwick, which is obviously about 45 minutes away from Glasgow. And then the day before the game, it got cancelled completely. And obviously the fans were refunded. At the point when the trip was still going ahead, because of the inconvenience, the club did offer, I think, £300, sort of a partial refund. I believe they offered them guaranteed tickets for the Liverpool game at Anfield as well, and also a complimentary screening of the game in Bar 72. But at the end of the day, it seems that there's been a lot of issues with these day trips before, and this is the first time it seems that the club has actually ever went out of the way to try and compensate fans. Now, that compensation isn't going to be anywhere near enough for fans that have booked overnight accommodations at airports and transfers to airports and stuff like that. But again, it's just like the communication aspect of this. We've had a lot of issues with us recently from the club, where the communication off the pitch in terms of certain issues, it's just not there. And it's just like we understand that mistakes happen, Brian, but you're just wanting that communication to be better from the club, aren't you?
Yeah, this is just a complete and utter failure of communication, as you said. I think now the Rangers have said they're going to investigate it, but I think they need to, once that investigation's happened, communicate out the findings. So when did Rangers know? When did CTM tell Rangers that there was problems? So who's at fault here? Is it CTM not telling Rangers, or is it Rangers knowing and not communicating that to the fans? But either way, it's been a complete and utter shambles, and just badly handled. And it's just another one of those things that gets added onto the issues. Everyone's a bit kind of not happy with Rangers to now won the park, or not happy that we're not spending money in our Boxing Day and the deadline day, and then this is just another thing that gets lumped on. Good performances on the park cover up all this in the main, and we're not getting that now, and that's why these issues are kind of flaring up and just not helping things. But for me, it's just basic communication. Just be a bit more transparent with the fans, and I think that's something Rangers aren't particularly good at a number of issues, not just this. They don't seem to like to just say to the fans, look, this is what's happening, this is why it's happening, and this is what we're going to do about it. And I don't know why that's the case. I'm pretty sure Rangers have got a comms team there, so I'm not sure why they're not particularly transparent or direct with fans, but I think it's something that needs sorting out.
No, it absolutely does, Ian. I think the sort of biggest issue for me out with the sort of communication aspect is, you even look at the ticket prices for the Champions League, which I thought were just way, way overboard, to be honest. And the fact is that Rangers now are offering, or they're supposedly offering, a premium product, a premium service at premium prices, but it seems that the only part that they're offering is the premium prices and not the premium product or the premium service on or off the park.
Yeah, I mean, as ever, fans get the shitty end of the stick, don't they? That's basically it. I mean, it's always been the case, I suppose, and it gets sort of when big figures or numbers in terms of costs come into the equation, then it just highlights it even more, and it just makes it the Champions League ticket prices. I suppose you can argue the toss whether it's what the going rate is or not. I mean, I don't know enough about what other clubs are charging around Europe, and that's difficult to make a judgment call on. And Rangers or anyone who charges that will say at the end of the day, if they sell out, then they're justified in charging that, which I don't think is a fair argument. But that's probably the way they'll look at it and say if people pay it, then that's right. I mean, I remember harking back to the 90s again. There was a huge outcry about the ticket prices for the very early Champions League games, and can't remember what it was, but it was probably something like 40 quid for a package of 3 tickets or something like that. But what happened was the fans voted with their feet. They didn't sell the tickets. Stadium, if you look back at some of that footage from sort of 95, 96, or 94, some of the games, the stadiums were, there was 35,000 in there for Champions League games. And that was because the prices were too high and people said, right, we're just not going to pay it. If people do pay it now, if fans pay it, then, they'll be encouraged to do the same again next time. So maybe we should be thinking as fans, well, we're not going to take this anymore. We're not going to pay that money. But that's really difficult to tell somebody not to go to the game. They want to go to the games. So, it's you've almost got a captive audience there. So, but as usual, as I say, fans are always at the bottom of the pile when it comes to consideration, and it's long been the case. And there's no sort of obvious sign of that happening, changing anytime soon. But it's partly communication, but it's also partly judgment and who you do your commercial deals with as well. And if there are problems, if there's been problems in the past, similar problems, then Rangers should be looking at that and saying, well, do we really want to work with these people? Have they got the capacity to do what they're promising to do? And if not, then we ditch them and go with someone else. I mean, that should apply whether it's kit suppliers, whether it's travel companies or whatever. Then you have to assess it. What are they doing? Are they doing a good job? If they're not doing a good job for our customers, which is the fans, then we get rid of them and we find somebody better, or we do it ourselves or whatever.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I think as well, obviously you're saying there about fans voting with their feet back then. I think nowadays that we seem to be more now, that season ticket culture seems to be the biggest it's ever been, in the sense that you look at some of the games now, Ibrox has sold out every game since we have came back into the top flight. Even when we're below, the only games really that weren't getting sold out was the one in the Championship under the Spivs, and that was for, obvious reasons off the part where it was a real shambles, like nowhere, this is right now is nowhere near as bad as it was back then. But that's the thing as well, as Rangers fans, we expect the best and we want the best and we want the best for the club. So, a lot of people might think, well, fans are moaning about maybe wee things, or, look at where we were a few years ago, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, it's, okay, that might be true, but you want to improve, you want to get better every day. That's what Rangers are supposed to be all about. We're not supposed to stand still. We're supposed to keep moving.
I think that's the problem. I think, sorry to interrupt, but I think part of the problem we've got here is that because things were so bad before, there's almost a sort of attitude of saying, well, look how bad it was. We should just be grateful for what we've got just now and stop complaining or whatever. But that's exactly the opposite to what we should be doing. We should be saying, well, look how bad things got before. Let's not let anything like that happen again. Let's nip it in the bud now, because these, I'm not saying that the current board is anything like that, and I'm not saying that that's the slippery slope you're on. But when things start to go wrong, if you let them slip, if you let one thing go, then somebody will let something else go, and where does it end? And then before you know it, the current people have gone, and somebody else has come in, and they have no sort of qualms about just ripping people off, openly, which is what was happening before. So, we have to, as a fan base, stand up and be counted. Now, I'm not saying that people should boycott games by any stretch of the imagination, but I am saying that, you know, it's quite right for people to complain and to make a song and dance about it and shout about these things when they go wrong, because if we don't, then, you know, who knows where we'll find ourselves in the future.
No, absolutely. And moving back onto the pitch, after the game on Wednesday, I was sort of very interested in Gio's comments in the press conference where, you know, beforehand he was saying he was very pleased with the squad that we had, and then afterwards he was saying that, you know, in order to compete at Champions League level, we need to spend, you know, I think he said hundreds of millions of pounds. I might be misquoting him there, and if I do apologise. But I mean, that it's like, I don't know how on one hand they can be happy with the squad that he's got, and then on the other say that, you know, we need hundreds of millions of pounds to compete in the Champions League. And I mean, that's after a game against Ajax, who, despite being obviously a top team, you know, it's not the hardest group in the hardest game, in the group that we're going to face on paper anyway, Brian. So just wondered to see sort of your thoughts on the comments as well.
I think for me, with those comments, he's kind of wanting to have his cake and eat it. You know, he said a couple of days prior that he had no regrets in the transfer market, but now after a 4-0 defeat, he's saying, oh, we can't possibly expect to compete. We need hundreds of millions, but we've also just asked all our fans to fork out somewhere between £150 to £180 for the tickets, and we've not spent any of that money in the transfer window. Now, for me, some of his comments had some merit, if you take them out of context. You know, if you look at it in the cold light of day, teams from countries like Scotland aren't supposed to get in the Champions League. You know, if you want to be realistic about it, UEFA probably don't want teams from countries aside of Scotland in their Premier competition. They see us as Europa League teams and nothing more. And, you know, I think the lesson we learned from the other night was it is a massive step up. But I just think in context of the previous game before and these comments before the Ajax game, it's just a bad look. You can't come out and say that stuff. You've got to read the room a bit better and kind of go, you know, right, well, that might be true in the cold light of day. You know, you just need to kind of read the room and know what not to say. And I think he's dropped the ball a bit there, Gio. I think his communication's usually pretty decent in the press. I think his press conferences are usually pretty decent and he gets most things spot on. But I think with that one, he dropped the ball.
Mm-hmm. No,
I kind of disagree. Sorry, I disagree a wee bit. I agree that maybe he shouldn't have said that. There was a, you know, in the context of, you know, after these defeats, maybe complaining about it is maybe it's, you know, just sounds like sour grapes in some ways. But I do think you can argue quite easily that he was happy with his squad, but also agree that we're never going to be able to compete at the Champions League level because on finances and the players, the squad we've got. He's happy with the squad, but that is in the context of domestic football and whatever. Where I would say I'm less impressed by it is whether or not he's happy with his squad. I mean, I think, you know, that's where I would disagree, and I don't think the squad's anywhere near good enough for the domestic level, never mind for Champions League. So whether he's happy with it or not, I don't understand why he would be happy with it, is what I'm saying in the first place. I think that applies. But also the Champions League is clearly out of our reach in terms of finances. So I think the two things you could say the two things, but I don't understand how he could say the first one in the first place, because I think it's all the crap. Because I don't believe he's happy with that squad. I don't see how he could have looked at that squad at any point this season and said, you know, I think we've got a good team here. We're doing well, and you know, I'm quite happy. If there's money to be spent. If there is money to be spent that he didn't spend, it worries me, because I question his judgment on that, because I would say there's no way that anybody sensible will look at that squad and say, it doesn't need any more money spent on it at all, because it's absolutely as good as it's going to get. That's where I think he's wrong. But I think if he genuinely believes that, I think it's fair enough for him to say that and say, you know, that we can't compete at the Champions League level as well.
I think those comments would have looked less bad if we were ripping it up domestically and sweeping all before.
Well, exactly.
That's not been the case. I mean, going by his kind of comments, then, you know, if we need hundreds of millions to compete in the Champions League, then based on our budget compared to likes of Hibs, for example, we should be absolutely annihilating them, and we should have been 3-0 up before that referee was even a factor, and we weren't. And that, for me, that's where I've got the bigger issue with Gio is domestically. I think European-wise this season, you know, I think we're all kind of like it's good to be there kind of, you know, nobody would really, I think when the PSV draw came out, I think everybody acknowledged it would be a tough task and a big ask for us to get there, and now we're there, and when the group stage came out, I think people were realistic in thinking, you know, Europa League was probably the best we could get. But I think my main issue with Gio was domestically. I think his tactics and his style of play, they don't suit the domestic game, and I think for me that was what those comments kind of annoyed me more, was because I'm saying, we are sitting saying that, but you're not exactly pulling up any trees domestically.
No, exactly. I mean, again, for me, it comes down to communication, ironically, because the thing is, as fans, we don't know what's going on. You know, we don't know what's going on in the dressing room, what's going on in the boardroom. I mean, in fairness, there's an argument to it. Should we really know? I mean, it's not really our place to know what's going on sometimes, but at the same time, we care about the club and we want what's best for the club. I mean, I put a wee note down here that, you know, he's obviously said that he's happy with the squad, but do we know if he's just saying that to maybe protect people above him, whether that is Ross Wilson or the board? And we need to realise as well that Ross Wilson and the board have got two completely sort of different functions where, you know, I think Ross Wilson will get a lot of slack for, you know, either not spending money correctly or, you know, not spending money at all. But if there wasn't any funds that were made available to the manager, that's not Ross Wilson's fault. That's the board's fault for not allowing those funds. It's not Ross Wilson that controls the budget. What you can say about someone like Ross Wilson is, well, why are you spending $4 million on Davies, who's hardly kicked a ball? Why are you spending $4 million on Yilmaz, who's hardly kicked a ball? I mean, I know he's more of a project player, but, you know, Davies has came in to make an instant impact. Even your Matondo as well. He has a sort of, I would say, an in-between Davies and Yilmaz, in the sense that he is a project player, but you also need him to sort of come in and hit the ground running, because he was brought in, I think, as a right winger, because that was the position that we were struggling with. But it seems that he's more comfortable out on the left. And now you've got him, Kent, Sakala, and it seems like once again the only winger we've got Scott Wright. But for me, Ian, it's like either way, it's not good, because if he is happy with the squad, then that's not good, because I think we can all tell that squad isn't good enough. But then if he isn't actually happy with the squad, then he's just saying that to protect people above him, and that's also not a good thing. So it's a lose-lose in my opinion, regardless of what way he actually does think.
Yeah, I mean, none of us really know. I suppose that is, as you say, I mean, that is part of the problem. We don't know whether funds are available, and I understand why managers, they've got to be careful what they say. They don't want to say something that's going to drop their boss in it or drop themselves in it, and so quite often they'll just say this sort of come out with this sort of platitudes and whatnot. And you know, I understand that, and I don't really get too bothered about that. It's not so much what they say, but if they genuinely believe that the squad is good enough and there was money available to spend that wasn't spent, either through his choice or through the director of football's choice, then that is a concern. I mean, you know, even the players we have signed, you know, we've got a whole, you know, how many of them have been regular starters for one reason or another this season? You know, 2 maybe out of the 7 or whatever we signed. And you could look back, you know, we're still looking at the players. I think I read something somewhere saying that 9 of the squad that played on Saturday against Celtic were there in 2019. I don't know if that's right. It's something along those lines. Whereas Celtic had 3 left in their squad from those times. So, you know, I mean, there's 2 ways of looking at that, I suppose. You know, get continuity, and if the players are doing well, then fine, that's great. But clearly, that's not necessarily the case. So, you know, we don't necessarily need to know what the budgets are and all that sort of stuff, but we need to know whether, you know, all that money that's been raised, where's it going? Is it, are we going to be building a new team, or are we sort of patching up sort of players that perhaps have already reached their peak? I think we were talking last season on the podcast about the squad, and that they'd reached their peak at winning the league at 55, and that was the time, you know, quite often you know teams sort of start off a league win and then they sort of build on that. But I think that team had reached their peak, and then that was the time to sort of start splitting them up and rebuilding for a new team. And that has not happened, and it didn't happen last season, and it's not happened this season. So, you know, there's, you know, for me, there's you know, serious concerns about how the money's been spent, and if, you know, and how, whether any money is going to be spent again on players, and whether the judgment of the people who are making those decisions as well, whether it be Ross Wilson or Van Bronckhorst or whoever.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I think that's a good few points there, especially in terms of, you know, what you touched on with the squad coming to its peak. I think, you know, I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing. You know, I don't think, to be honest, we weren't actually terribly bad last season domestically. You know, we get 89 points, which for, I think, 8 out of the last 10 seasons would have been enough to win the league. It was just that Celtic were more consistent. On the flip side of that, though, you say, well, if Celtic are being that consistent, then we should be that consistent as well, because we've got as good a squad, if not a better squad, than them on paper. Well, certainly we should have had last season with the rebuild that they were going through. But obviously that wasn't the case. Just a reminder, guys, as well, that you can get this podcast on all your usual podcast providers, such as Google, iTunes and Spotify. And just thank everyone again for watching us live on YouTube. And just before we go into our next point, just want to give you another message from our sponsors, Zenith Coins, which is the official Rangers pub coin trophy. And each gold-plated coin has a unique serial number engraved on the outer rim, and it comes complete with a Rangers presentation box and a certificate of authenticity. Good to get that out in the end. And you can join fellow Rangers legends and fans like Ali McCoy, Derek Johnson, Malvin Andrews, Tom Stoltman, Gordon Ramsay, just to name a few, and own your official club coin. And the main part is the part that we all love. You can get a wee bit of money off as well. You can get 10% off your purchase by using the code GN10 in the promo box. That is the code GN10, and you can get 10% off your Zenith Rangers coin. Obviously, I've been talking about the last week, but we've got a game to look forward to, or maybe not look forward to, on Wednesday now. First and foremost, obviously, it's Napoli at home. It was due to take place on Tuesday, but because of the sort of policing and security arrangements regarding the Queen's Sag passing, the game's been moved to the Wednesday because of policing resources, apparently. Obviously, that means that a lot of people probably won't be able to, well, maybe not a lot of people won't be able to go, but some people might have had plans, etc., etc. I think the interesting part from this, rather than the fixture change date, is the fact that no away fans will be allowed in on Wednesday, because of the potential sort of increase to, I don't know, you would need more police, a bigger police presence there, I suppose. Caveat to that is that, unfortunately, when we go over to Naples at the end of October, we won't have any fans there as well. Brian, what was your sort of takes on that? First of all, the date of the game being changed, and also, you know, the fact that there's not going to be any away fans allowed in either way.
I mean, I think it's obviously disappointing for our fans. I think a lot of them would have booked up to go to Naples. I'm hoping that they're going to be sort of compensated in some way. I've seen a few of them say, you know, they've already booked hotels and travel and stuff like that. So I'm hoping that, you know, any fans that's already kind of spent money manage to get that all refunded. I think on this one, we're obviously not involved in the conversations between Rangers and Police Scotland, and, you know, it's involved. So I'm guessing this is all just down to police resource. They don't have enough resource on the Tuesday night because of the everything going around going on around the Queen, and then I'm guessing on the Wednesday night they've got enough resource to police the game, but not the additional resource they would need to police it with away fans. I think I'm guessing that's why that's come into play. So I think we probably just need to take that in face value. It's disappointing for our fans because I think we would have taken quite a few over to Naples, as we do anywhere we go. But I think on this one we probably just need to take that at face value.
Yeah, it is disappointing. I mean, this isn't an Napoli podcast, obviously, but I think you've really got to feel for their fans who, would have been travelling probably starting from today, maybe going in tomorrow for the game on Tuesday. And if you can imagine if it was all the way around how raging Rangers fans would have been, like 2 days before the game, and then that happening, we would have been raging about it. So, but I suppose these things happened. I mean, I was thinking about going to Naples. I did get the week booked off work. So I'm going to have a week off work when I've done nothing. But I've seen on Skyscanner that there's return flights for Edinburgh to Budapest for like 30 quid the week of the game. So I might just do that instead. But in terms of the actual game itself, Ian, I mean, clearly we need a massive performance here. I mean, look, we'll try and be positive. We'll try and say that we can still get out of the group in some way, whether that's third place or second place. It's highly unlikely as I think that is, but I suppose we still need to be positive in some way. But Napoli, they're not going to be an easy game at all. Top of Serie A, they hammered Liverpool last week. Do you think we can get a result on Wednesday? And do you think it's maybe a must-win game to try and progress from the group in some way as well?
Well, I think if we're going to try and progress from the group, then yeah, it would be a must-win game. But I mean, to be honest, I don't. Even before as soon as the draw was made, I didn't think there was any chance of us getting out the group to qualify for the next stage of Champions League. I mean, I thought third place. I thought was highly unlikely as well, to be perfectly honest. I mean, nothing that we've seen since has changed my view on that at all. So I have no real hope. I had no real hopes or expectations that we would get out of the group at all. That said, the thing is, you just don't know really how things might pan out. With the crowd behind them, if the players are in the right mindset, if they're ready, if they feel they've got something to prove, if we just get out there and just go for it, who knows? I mean, it's not impossible. You would think it's unlikely, to be perfectly honest. I mean, let's be brutally honest about it. They're on paper a much better team than us, but we were talking about earlier about unity and togetherness and fight and all that sort of stuff. All those cliches. That's what we need. We need all that to come to the fore. It's not always enough, to be honest. If the other team is better than you, then sometimes you have to put your hands up and just say they're better than us. And that might end up being the case on Wednesday. But, the very least we expect is for the players to go out there and give their all and don't leave a single thing on the pitch. Just get out there, just do what they can. And we've seen results last season in the Europa League that you would not have expected. This is maybe asking a little bit more, but, nonetheless, we beat Dortmund last season. Let's not forget that. Dortmund are a top team. They're a Champions League quality team, and we beat them. We knocked them out. Beat RB Leipzig. They're a top team, quality, Champions League standard team. So we can do it, but I think, if we're going to be realistic about it, it'll be really difficult. But if we're going to do it, we'll do it to Ibrox. We'll do it with the crowd behind the players and the players up for it. That's, at the very least, that's if that happens and we don't win or we don't get a point, then, I will be less angry than I would have been if we go out there and sort of capitulate, mildly. That's all I'm asking.
No, absolutely. And I think that the fans are going to be a big factor in this, in terms of us possibly getting a result or not. I mean, one good thing you would say about not having any fans over there is that they're not going to have any away fans here, and that does mean that it's going to be literally 50,000 Rangers fans, and you won't get that in Naples because, as much as their fans are mental, there's not an awful lot of them because they never actually sell out their stadium. But Ibrox, I think tickets are have been put back up on sale over the last day or so, and I know Ibrox will be sold out. But Brian, I mean, obviously, as Ian touched on, it's going to be a really, really difficult game. I was kind of in two minds over what team would be easier between Napoli and Ajax, because I think both in terms of maybe individual players are on a very similar level. You would maybe say that Ajax are a wee bit more consistent in Europe, but you could say that maybe the reason that Napoli aren't is because of the quality and the standard of league that they're in, which means that, you know, they're maybe not going to qualify for the Champions League every single year. Whereas it's obviously a lot easier for Ajax to do that in the Dutch League when maybe there's only 2 or 3 teams that are you know, capable of doing that. I mean, how different do you think the game's going to be from last week, maybe just in terms of the actual opposition?
I mean, having watched both Ajax and Napoli last week, they're both probably a step up from a lot of, taking Dortmund aside, they're probably a step up from what we played last season. They're probably, in terms of that Dortmund team we played on the night, I would say both Napoli and Ajax are probably playing better just now than that team we played. So they're definitely a level above. I was really impressed with Napoli and how they just took Liverpool apart. That's probably all I can say about it, is it was a complete kind of annihilation of Liverpool's high line. They play with a quickness and a tempo, and they've got loads of speed on the break. They are a real quality outfit. So I think if we are going to get anything out of the game, I think, you know, Ibrox is going to need to come to the fore. I think the fans always play their part on European nights, but it's going to need a real top performance from the Rangers team. They're going to need to just put everything on the line and go for it. And even that might not be enough, because they are a real top outfit. I think, having seen one game now played in this group for all the teams, I think we all thought it would be Liverpool top of the group. I'm not so sure now, to be honest. I was really impressed with Ajax and Napoli last week. So it's definitely a big ask, but nothing's impossible.
No, you're right, nothing is impossible, and that's kind of a good segue into our next message from our sponsors just before we wrap up, because it is the Football Prizes competition, and you can go over to the Twitter page at Gersnet Online to put your entries in. And the prize this week is another, you know, belter of a prize, let's be honest. It's this season's signed away shirt with the Champions League patches on it as well. So, as Brian says, nothing's impossible. So if you enter that competition, there is a possibility of you winning it. But I think that's a good way to sort of wrap up on this Sunday. Obviously, not the podcast that we kind of do, just positivity, but you know, that's what it's like being a Rangers fan. You need to take it and, you know, just get it. Thanks very much to Brian and Ian for joining me this evening. Thanks very much to the viewers at home. I've been Craig Ray, and thanks very much for listening to this week's edition of the Gersnet Podcast. See you.